name's Melina Laboucan-Massimo, and I'm from the Lubicon Cree First Nation, which is in northern Alberta. It's just 45 minutes out of Peace River. I was born in Peace River, and I grew up mostly in Alberta and then in Edmonton for a bit. But the reason why what I'm doing is working on shutting down the tar sands, which is a part of the work that IEN is doing, as well as other environmental organizations of one I work for as well. But the reason being is because the community that I come from is a community that's been devastated by oil and gas and logging exploration, and that's conventional, and then also it's becoming unconventional oil, which is the tar sands, which is known as the tar sands, and we have that development in our area. So I come from the Peace River deposit area, and there's also the Athabasca region and the Cold Lake region. And within that, they're also building a natural gas pipeline across our traditional territory without the consent of the Lubicon, and that's a natural gas pipeline, a jumbo 42-inch diameter pipeline that's going to be fueling the tar sands extraction process. So there's a lot of development that's happening in our traditional territory without the consent, and it's having negative impacts on our community and my family. Around the time I was born, there was about 18 out of 21 miscarriages because of the contamination that was happening on the land. And then there's been a high incidences of tuberculosis, which has affected a third of the population, as well as there's respiratory illnesses in the community because of a lot of the sour gas and the sulfur emissions that come out of all of the development in the area. So there's health concerns as well as land issues, and namely the moose, and a lot of the moose is being driven out of the area, and there's also contamination in the wildlife and in the water systems. The land for me feels like it's who I am and where I come from. It feels like it's a part of my existence in a way. Like, if for me, when I am back home and I'm on the land, I feel calm, and I feel like I'm at one, like the quietness and how it's so nice to be out on the land where it's away from, say, noise pollution even, or light pollution, where you can actually see the stars. And it's also spiritually based, so we can actually practice our customs and our ceremonies on the land. And I find that because of all the development, this is being threatened. Our spiritual connection to the land, the ability to be on the land without the hindrance of all of these different kind of pipelines and extraction and all of the associated repercussions that come from these things. I think that the development, the kind of resource exploitation that's happening is really disconnecting us and removing us from the land. And for me, I feel like it's a threat to my ability to even choose to have a family on our traditional territory, or choose, if I wanted to have children, raise them there, because it's being more and more split up, destroyed, fragmented. So that's, for me, the connection to the land is actually just having the land in its natural state and not being subjected to resource exploitation, which is contaminating the land and destroying our traditional medicines like the muskeg, which is traditional to where our territory is, like being able to even harvest rat root, or being able to eat our traditional meats, being able to have sweat lodges or tea dances and ceremonies. That if we don't have the land, then how can we practice all of these things that I want to be able to do and teach to my children, because I've been able to be taught that as a younger person, and it feels like as time goes on, it happens less and less because of all of the attacks on the land, I guess. People should, because it's such a destructive project, and it's affecting so many people, like 50,000 people, Indigenous people in the north of Alberta, and then how it just expands out to the rest of, like, because of the water basin. Like, the Athabasca watershed is the largest, one of the third largest watersheds in the world, and it's a sixth of our fresh water supply. And the fact that they're drawing out water from for the tar sands projects, and then they contaminate it on top of that. It's like a critical issue for people to know about. So it's water issues, it's land issues, it's the air quality as well because of all the respiratory illnesses that are developed. And then it's also Indigenous treaty rights that are being violated and our human rights that are being violated. So I think it's a massive issue that more people should know about because it will eventually be affecting them because it has all these tentacles that are spreading out throughout North America. And so that's why I think it's so important for people just to be in the know about it. For me, it comes from my grandmother, like my kokum. And she was taken from us, like from tuberculosis. So it's kind of a hard thing to talk about, but that's definitely where I look towards where my strength comes from, where my connection to where I come from is. I think the most direct link for me is looking towards my kokum and who she was as a traditional knowledge keeper and a traditional medicine. She knew a lot of the medicines from the land, and she knew all of our traditional stories, which were passed down to my father. And she was just someone that grew up on the land and who I was able to learn from when I was younger. And so she's one of the people that I always look towards, even though she's passed on, as that's where I draw my strength from. And that's, praying to our ancestors and praying to all of those that have come before us and fought for what we're fighting for is where I find my strength. And I know that I'm not alone in it, even though a lot of times it does feel really isolating, and people wonder why, and maybe don't even understand what I do from the outside. But I think being among people and people like from the Defenders of the Land Alliance or network, it's helpful to know that we're not alone in our struggles, even though we're isolated and from our different geographical regions, which kind of isolate us in that way. And we can shine light on those things where, say, for instance, like Barrier Lake, how they've had a lot of police brutality. I think by being able to have an alliance and network like Defenders of the Land, communities like that won't be so alone, and we can start learning about each other's land issues. Like, especially where I come from, we're facing the major issue of the tar sands, which is the biggest industrial development in the world right now, and it's affecting all of the north of Alberta and extending into Saskatchewan, and then also pushing into unceded territory in British Columbia. And I think things like this, we need to have these types of things like Defenders of the Land in place to be able to build these alliances and to be able to be strong in supporting each other. Because if we don't support each other and we don't learn from each other's mistakes, then that's where I think we can kind of just go into these cycles, which the government likes to play on a lot because of maybe the divide and conquer tactics that they play, or the stalling tactics that I've seen in my community, where we've tried to deal with land claim issues, and we've pretty much seen nothing come out of it for years and years, where over $14 billion have come out of our traditional territory in revenue for the Alberta government, and yet my family goes without running water. So just to be able to share these types of stories to other people and talk about what worked and what didn't, I think is really important for Defenders and why Defenders has come into existence.